Okay, yeah, so thank you. While everybody's kind of joining in, those that trickle in, if you could just take a second, I would love for you to put in to the chat, if you can, just a little bit about your biggest constraint as an agent, kind of what you're facing. It could be that you know don't have enough stabilized listings. It could be that you aren't getting enough traction with buyers. The interest rates are too high. Whatever it is that you feel like is your biggest constraint, I would love to be able to summarize those at the end and look at some options in order for us to potentially help in those areas. So if you can, anything that comes to mind over the presentation that is your constraint, I would love to hear those. So Lauren, can you see that presentation okay?
Yes, I can.
Perfect. So I would like to go ahead and get right into it. I know our time is short and your time is precious. So today I really wanted to focus on how we can help increase your commission. That means not only increase the amount of commission that you are making monthly, weekly, annually, but how to actually stabilize that. And that could be pretty difficult, as most of us know in the real estate market. It's really relatively hard to stabilize anything. And we would like to be able to find ways to work with you to be able to do that, to find some consistency on when the commission's coming in, how much you can make, and keep that something that's predictable in the future as well. So let me go ahead and open up this next slide. So just a little bit about the investor market that I wanted to share before we really get started. And that's really about the actual percentages of transactions that are going to investors, meaning investors are actually the ones that are buying them, and it's not actually going to a conventional buyer. I think many times people are misunderstood in terms of who's buying properties, and they think the investor pool is actually a very, very small percentage of the market, that most of these houses are actually selling to end users. But in fact, there's a big percentage of population, or a population of these homes, that are selling to these investors. And this is the most recent stat here, that it's about 14 to 26% of homes. That means that almost on average in the market, a quarter of the homes are selling to investors. In California, actually, it's a little bit higher than a lot of the other markets. I saw nationwide this morning when I double checked the stats, it was around 14% nationwide, but it's around 26, 23% in California. This is really focusing on kind of the last 6 months primarily, but it goes to show that investors are making a massive contribution to the amount of homes that are going for sale. Again, most of these homes being homes that are listed either on the MLS that are pocket listings, but they're single family homes on average. I want to make sure that you can see that full screen. Is that a little bit better, hopefully? And you can see that. So the next thing is really just talking about kind of the housing stock. So it's a really good question of, okay, why is so many houses selling to investors? What's going on? Is there a shift in the market? Is it just the fact that interest rates are high and nobody else can afford them? And it's really good to look into actually the reasons of what's going on in the housing market. And again, I'm going to primarily focus here in California, but it is really nationwide. California has a little bit of different stats, and you can see my very first one there. Most of the homes were built in the mid 20th century, meaning they're 1950s to about the 70s of homes. So if you look back of how old that is, we're talking 50 to 70 years plus in age of these homes. The interesting part about that is we have a lot of first or second families in these homes, meaning the homes are almost all original. And I actually saw this chart come up this morning from Current Culture, Current Matters, that is really, really interesting. It says a growing number of homes are entering their prime remodel years. So you can see from 2007 to about now, and then the projections for the next few years, there's going to be a massive influx of homes entering the market. And it's really going to be this shift in paradigm where these houses have to get renovated. And there are people that, of course, are DIYers that like to fix up their homes. Some people want to customize their homes. But I would say over 90% of homes, in order to be, one, bank financeable, but two, in order for somebody to be interested in it, has to be renovated or at least modernized so it's habitable, or something that somebody is actually desiring to move into. So if you see a lot of the houses that are kind of original condition in these 50s to 70s, they're very weathered. Roofs are going out. The average roof cost is about $30,000 for a roof. Kitchens are $40,000 to $50,000. And people just aren't sitting on that kind of capital to come in, buy the house, especially if we project that interest rates are always going to stay around 4 to 5 to 6% and have capital to come in and renovate the homes. So this provides a huge opportunity for the investor market because there needs to be this gap filled where houses are available to renovate, somebody needs to renovate them, and then they need to go to their end buyers. So while a lot of people, I feel like, look down a little bit on the investor market, it's absolutely necessary in order to bring the current houses up to trends and them to get to market into the right hands. This is kind of alluding to what I'm saying is it's really becoming more of a millennial market. Millennials just recently surpassed the population of the baby boomers, which is very interesting because a lot of millennials are yet to be homeowners. So this is, again, showing that the market is shifting and who's owning homes and who wants homes. Millennials do typically want a nicer home, more renovated home. Historically, they are also less likely to renovate the entire home by themselves. A lot of the baby boomer population bought homes knowing that they were going to have to do some modifications to the home. Millennials really tend to like a more turnkey home. So again, it just shows exactly why so many houses are actually going to investors, because it's an absolute necessity. It's not because of the fact that investors are putting higher offers or there's other buyers out of the market. We know right now inventory is very low. There's a lot of buyers sitting on the sideline waiting for the houses. They just can't find the right one for the price. And especially with the high interest rates and the high prices, people are only buying houses that they absolutely love, that they want to move into, because they're not going to break the bank and move and lock themselves into something that they have to spend more money on or just don't absolutely love. We've found that as investors the hard way many times, because we know that they're going to wait it out for the right home. So talking about kind of the future market trends, as we know, inventory is still low. So not only are we looking at that inventory is extremely low, mostly because of the interest rates kind of locking in some of that inventory, we know that with the current trends of the first 2 quarters of the year, we're saying 25% of homes are selling to investors approximately in California. It's really kind of at an all-time low for inventory this year as well. And interest rates are still relatively high. So we foresee, as we continue on this transition, if interest rates continue to go down slightly, prices may go up, stabilize, truth to be found, but ultimately we know that there's going to be another massive flush of homes that ultimately go into the market, and most of these homes are going to be coming from the baby boomers and transferring into the millennials. And like we see with construction cost continuing to skyrocket, these people just don't have the funds in order to renovate them. So that's where we kind of get into, where do I fit in? Well, of course, as you can imagine, every transaction needs 2 representatives. We do a lot of research on the direct-to-seller market as well, because I think as well it's kind of a false myth that people believe that a lot of investors purely just go direct-to-seller. But in fact, most transactions actually do go through real estate agents. And what we're finding is actually most homeowners still want that. We've seen some different types of businesses enter the market, companies like Open Door that ultimately tried to kind of remove the agent from the transaction. But ultimately, we found that most homeowners are most comfortable using a representative, and every transaction ultimately leads to having 2 representatives. So you, as an agent, is your opportunity. You can be both of these representatives in an investment transaction, which is relatively common if you have a listing that needs to be renovated. Most of the time, we can actually have you represent us as a buyer's agent as well. Or you can represent just one side. Typically in our case, which I'll go over today, is the buyer's agent. So let's talk a little bit about the market potential. So just want to kind of pause just for a second and do the math. I know sometimes it's best to kind of digest, okay, what are we actually looking at here? So an average of 20% of the homes are selling to investors. I used a conservative number there because I want to look kind of nationwide, but ultimately it's a little higher than that in California. With the market at an all-time low, we've still seen 260,000 home sales as of June this year. So the first 6 months just in California of this year at an all-time low market, 260,000 sales. Then the last part is that means over 50,000 of these homes have been sold to investors. So that's a lot of transactions in just the very first 6 months. So if we look at the financial implications on this, that means using a median home sale price of $760,000 and a conservative 2% commission. We know that varies a bit, but on average around 2%. That's $760 million in just buyer's commission in 6 months and about $1.5 billion in total commission. So there's a huge pocket of opportunity for real estate agents to jump into this market, which is ultimately, it doesn't sound like it, but is relatively untapped for agents to hyper-focus on the investor market. And we only imagine that it's going up to here based off of all the indicators I just shared with you with the low inventory and the price points and the baby boomer homes. This is only going to go up double or triple and quadruple from here. So wanted to really showcase how much commission is out there up for grabs. And what we've really found is that looking through the data, there are some repeat transactions, meaning that they're using the same real estate agent on the buyers and the listing agent, but it's not extremely common. In fact, a lot of these are unique cases that it doesn't have repeat buyers and agents on the same transactions. So talking about seizing the opportunity from here on out, for the rest of the presentation, that was really wanting to set the stage in the first 10 minutes, really set the stage of what the market size looks like. Because I think sometimes it feels like such a niche market in this investor pool that people tend to get discouraged and agents tend to get discouraged thinking, there's not enough opportunity. There's a lot more buyers than sellers out there in the traditional market. So I want to focus there. But as you can see, there's a tremendous opportunity. So from here on out, I want to talk a little bit about more of how you can take the information that I just shared and really apply it to what you're doing on a weekly, monthly, annual basis to increase your commission and stabilize that. So here we go. First, the secret equation. What is the actual secret equation? Well, actually, it's not much of a secret, but it genuinely is the buyer's agent. There's a huge opportunity in the buyer's agent pool because as we shift currently, we're seeing a lot of different things. Most of you are most likely very aware what's going on with the buyer's agent commission. It's not being disclosed in a different way, and many times they're saying now the buyer's going to have to pay for it. Handful of interpretations, but ultimately that's not an issue whatsoever for investors, and we'll talk about that a little bit. But the buyer's agent is someone that's many times underestimated. I know a lot of agents are like, they really squawk at the idea of wanting to be a buyer's agent because in the traditional market, if you put a traditional, conventional style real estate hat on, you're dealing with a person typically, or a family or a couple that has very, very specific preferences. They're only going to buy one house. Many times you have a high competition on the house that they want. So you spend weeks, months, and sometimes years looking for just one house for that one family, and you spend a ton of time working for your commission. So if it hasn't quite clicked yet, you might be thinking, I'm not exactly sure how this works, but give me just about 5 more minutes here, and I promise I will bring it all together. So what does it mean working with investors? So most investors interact with, most agents, as I say, interact with investors on kind of one-off transactions. What I mean by that is a listing agent may have a fixer that they just kind of inherited as a listing, or they worked for to get that listing, and they put it on the market, and their interaction with investors is they're getting offers, lowball offers, cash-only offers, and it's because they put maybe the words fixer in their listing, or they said investor friendly, or use some key term, or it just looks like a fixer, so it's attracting kind of the investor market. So that's a lot of times the only interaction that listing agents have had. And sometimes buyer agents have had some like friends and families that are investors perhaps, or maybe they've worked kind of one-off with an investor because they've worked with a different company before, but it's very typically kind of unique. It's not a super consistent relationship that you're building momentum and actually understanding that investor where you are doing multiple transactions with them. So I want to really kind of address both sides on both the listing agent side and the buyer's agent side. But again, the secret here really for us is that buyer's agent, because ultimately you can represent us on pretty much any transaction. So here's a couple benefits. For instance, can be a repeat client buying hundreds of properties every year for many years. There is no other traditional buying client of yours or anybody else's that is going to be buying multiple properties. Maybe in a person's lifetime, maybe you know the stats, but it's like 3 to 5 houses at most that somebody's going to buy, and you're talking about in their lifespan. So the chances of you buying multiple properties every single year is slim to none. And with investors, it's a completely different ballgame, because ultimately, people like us are looking for dozens of properties every single month. Far fewer contingencies, so that means less work for the agent. Many times there's a ton of contingencies. Most of you may know when you're working with FHA, VA loans, things like this, it can be very difficult. There's a lot of requirements, strict contingencies. You're talking appraisals and inspections. You got to make sure that they have the right funds. There's a lot of things that go into it to make sure that that transaction comes together. Getting the contract is not the end. There's a long escrow many times ahead of you. Whereas working with a company like ours, you have far less contingencies. Typically, it's just a few days of inspection to make sure that the house is exactly kind of what we underwrote it to be, which we'll talk about just a little bit, but that's typically it. Less emotions, more facts. Working with investors, it's purely facts. It has nothing to do with emotions. We don't mind anything about the house of, who was there, if somebody passed away in the house, if it's, too close to a neighbor that's rude. All of these things that are really going to play into a conventional buyer is not an emotional decision for us. It's really just coming down to the facts. And last, quick closes, less time, less work to make money. It's still work, don't get me wrong, but it's definitely going to be less work than a traditional transaction, because you do have less time. Typically, we close in 14 to 21 days. Sometimes faster than that, depending on what's going on with the seller situation, but it's a lot shorter timeline. We've had many agents that we've worked with that maybe went to the property once or twice. Could be more than that, depending on what's going on with the property, if we have to get in a few times, but ultimately, we've seen it's a lot less time and transactional work with the listing agent to get things done. The next part I want to talk about to kind of piece it together is really knowing your client. Knowing your client is super important. I don't think anybody would disagree, whether you're the listing agent or a buyer's agent. And in this situation, a buyer's agent, when you're sitting down with your client for looking, and you're about to go look for their home, you want to know pretty much everything possible to make sure you're looking in the right areas, because the worst thing that can happen is you sit down with your client, you kind of get a general idea, you do all of this work and research, start putting all of these different listing packet or these packages together, showcasing some of the properties that you want to bring them to, and they tell you, hey, listen, I don't like any of these. This is horrible. We're not in the right spot. You do not want to do that, so you spend a lot of time getting to know, hey, how many bedrooms and bathrooms? Do you want a single story, 2-story? Do you want a pool? Do you want ocean views? What part of town do you like it in? Do you like HOAs? There's a lot of things that you have to pull out of the client, or the client will give to you, in order for you to really spend your time wisely. And I'm telling you, it is also just important to know your client as the investor as well. The best part about knowing your client as the investor, it's a lot less emotional. So those kind of preferences will not change compared to many times when you're working with a traditional buying client. The preferences change all the time. They say, hey, this is actually not the part of town that I thought I like, or actually, I don't really like the 2-story as much as I thought. For us, the preferences always stay the same. So let's get to know your client a little bit. This will be sent at the very end, so you don't have to memorize and write all of this down, but I just want to give you an idea. If you sat down with me today and said, Mr. Sam, what would you like to buy? What are all your preferences? What can you do to help me be as focused as possible? You will get something just like this. The areas that I like to buy in, that we do most of our projects and transactions with, the prices that we love, like, and will do. Very similar to kind of a traditional client. They may say, hey, I might be able to push my budget up a little bit, but this is really where I love to stay. So love sub 800, anything under 800,000 we really, really like, obviously for the cost of money, for the amount of people that are going to buy that. Because if we're buying it, let's say at 750, by the time we're done with it, it's going to be close to $1 million. So we want to make sure that a lot of the clients that buy houses from us on the back end, meaning the end buyer that's going to live there, can't afford the homes. So we keep up with the market trends to say, okay, where is the best home price? What's the median home price for these areas? and I want to make sure I attract the most buyers that can afford these homes. Because if I'm pushing the limits of breaking records and saying, okay, this is going to be the most expensive house in the area, people may absolutely fall in love with the home, but it may be a little bit more difficult for us to sell because they just can't afford it in that pocket. We like sub 1.2. We do deals like this all the time. So anything under 1.2, and we'll do up to 5 million. So those are very unique luxury style properties. I will tell you now, as kind of some foreshadowing, those have to have a lot of opportunity in terms of the buy price and the list price. I just want to put it out there that says, hey, it would take a little bit more time, but if I were you, I would hyper focus in on sub 1.2, and that will be the best use of your time. In terms of the property types, I'll buy single family, condos, townhomes, and vacant duplexes. All of them we like vacant, of course, because we plan to renovate them. We're not looking to inherit tenants. So we have a pretty large range and variety of types of properties that we're open to buy. In terms of terms, this is the two generic terms that we put together. Of course, we work with you. We want to work very closely together, meaning you're kind of understanding our needs, and we're understanding what's going to work best by your recommendations. But these are the two terms that we put on there. Typically 20 days or less, no appraisal, sometimes inspection contingencies, but no loan contingencies. So with that said, you now know a little bit of why you want to work with investors, of what the benefits are. You also know a little bit of who the client is. So, okay, who's your investor and why do I want to work with them? And that's very similar to when you would go meet a typical buying client. You're like, okay, do you have proof of funds? Are you ready to actually buy? And are you sure you know what you want? You want to vet them. So again, last thing we want is for you to waste your time. So now you know those two things. The next question is, as a buyer's agent representing us, where do I actually find properties? And this is obviously probably the biggest pain point is, okay, I understand the rest. I understand exactly what you want and where I could try to help you, and the benefits, those are all great. But where can I actually find these properties? And there's really three main areas, and I'll talk about each. First is direct to seller, meaning that you're actually going out there, finding the listings from your network, from your friends, door knocking, flyers, all of those things. That is typically when you would be both the listing agent and the buyer's agent for us. So if you brought us a new listing that you had in your pocket, or something that you just went and signed a listing agreement with a seller, and you're like, wow, I thought a flipper on this. This would be a really great transaction for them. You call us, you're our agent. Very simple and straightforward transaction. But like I said here, it's the highest potential commission because you can earn both sides of commission. As we transition into this new commission model, we can pay 2.5% buyer's agent commission, just so that's clear. But it's most difficult and time consuming. Obviously, you're not typically getting listings every week. I really hope you are. For your sake and for ours, but typically most agents are not getting listings every single week. So this can be very difficult. It's very time consuming. It can also be costly. It can be costly in both your time and the money to market. The next option, and this is typically our favorite option, is pocket listings from your network. That doesn't mean it's your pocket listing. It means it's from your network. That means if you maybe see somebody post about a listing they have coming up on coming soon on Instagram or Facebook, that means maybe in your own network of agents that you work with, whether it's in offices or meetups, you hear of a listing that's coming up. Maybe it's friends or family that says, hey, I'm listing with this person, but yeah, if you know anybody that wants to buy it, I'd be interested. We get these all the time. I tell the team one of my favorite places in the world to find properties is my kids' preschool. There's a lot of people talking there, and people love to talk about homes, and I hear about at least one listing every single month. So this is a really great way to actually find great properties for us to renovate with you representing us as the buyer. But the key here is you have to put it out, meaning you let people know that you're looking for this type of property. Because if you don't put it out there and people don't know that you're working with investors, that you're looking for flips, then of course they're not going to be sending them to you or maybe talking to you about it. If you post it about on your Instagram, hey, I'm looking for X, Y, and Z for one of my best clients that's buying a lot of properties this month. If you have anything, send them to me. You'll be surprised as people get to know you, even if they may not have something right that second, They may have something in 3 months, 6 months. So being consistent and letting your network know can be a very great way to have consistent pocket listings come your way. I say this, highest rate of closure and most and medium difficulty, meaning you're not going out there and finding them. You're really just pushing it out to your network to say, hey, bring me your listings. I have a really great client that would love to put an offer on it, but you have a high rate of closure. Why I say that is because off-market properties, typically for us and investors, is worth a higher value. There's a handful of reasons behind that. I won't go through all of them, but one is if it's not on market, there's not as much competition, meaning of course, it's maybe us and a few other people putting offers in. So we have a higher chance of closing on that property, meaning it's a higher chance for you to actually get your contract signed or us to get our contract signed with you, and a higher chance of us going through escrow and closing it because the competition's not surrounding it, pushing up the offers. And I'll talk a little bit about more on-market properties. That's where I'll spend the last about 10 minutes here. But I really want to push that out there because that's a very simple one. That's something that you can be doing every single week, letting your market know and your network know, hey, this is what I'm looking for. Even I've seen some agents in my past that have gone to their weekly brokerage meeting and said, hey, do you mind, Mr. Broker, Mrs. Broker, if I have a few minutes, I just want to tell the team about this new client that I'm working with that's buying properties, and I would love to be their kind of go-to cash offer. So they end up getting 5 minutes at the weekly meeting to kind of talk a little bit about it. And we can give you those type of presentations to reuse and ultimately share with your network what we're looking for and how you can bring them value as well. Then the very last one, MLS. So obviously those are open market. Lowest rate of closure, meaning obviously there's a lot of visibility on the MLS, but they're the easiest. There's no reason that you should be able to find a fixer for us every single day. They're on the market. There's a lot of listing agents that put specific buzzwords, terms, and everything else in those listings. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how we actually look for those here in a second, just by using Zillow. I want to keep it as simple as possible. I'm sure you might use the actual MLS, or maybe you like Redfin or another tool, but I want to keep it very simple to show you how you can do that. So this is the process, and I will go through this, but just want to put it on paper so it's in front of you. So number one, find an address using our buy box criteria. The buy box criteria that we call buy box criteria is really the getting to know your investor part. Who are we? What are we looking for? How fast can we close? When do we want it? What pockets do we like? All of those kind of things. As you get to know us, you'll know that criteria like the back of your hand. And as I mentioned probably very briefly above, the pro tip there is the more you get to know us, the more you can really act on our behalf. It's very nice when you ramp up as an agent working with us, where you can say, okay, I know them very, very well, so I'll know if they really like this or really won't like this. So you won't have to constantly need our help, even though we're always happy to give it to you. It's us debottlenecking a bit so you can kind of act on our behalf. So again, one, finding an address using our criteria. Number two, determining the after repair value. And I'll talk a little bit about that, but this is not as straightforward as pulling just MLS comparable sheets. Many times people look in the area, they just say, okay, what's within 1 mile? What did it sell for? This is the after repair value. There's a little bit more, let's call it science behind it than that. And I want to make sure that this is a really important tool and component of the process that you understand well, because this is where you can spend the most time. So you want to make sure that you have it right so you don't waste the time. You spend your time very valuably understanding exactly what that after repair value looks like. And as you get to know us again, you will kind of take the shoes and shape of what we do. So you will become really very clear on how to underwrite these properties using some of our strategies. Number three, using our free investor underwriting calculator to find the offer price. This will be sent after the webinar today, where you can actually use our internal calculator, just plug in the numbers necessary after you find that after repair value, ARV, and it will actually give you the price that we would offer for it. We use all of our latest calculations, meaning cost of materials, cost of money, time to hold, all of those things, commissions, all of those things to determine, okay, well, how much and what can we buy it for? Number four, confirm numbers with a dedicated acquisition manager or really kind of a Flipur representative and submit the offer. So you have it all down. You find the address using our buy box. You comp it very quickly, finding the after repair value. You run it through our calculator to see what our offer price is. You run it by your Flipur representative, and that's it. Submit the offer, then follow up on that offer, and you can repeat this 5 times a day. Once you have it down, it may seem a little bit like a lot right now, but once you have this down, you'll be surprised on how fast you can actually do this. And you'll become more and more efficient as you get to understand our numbers, how you actually comp these properties. And this is a great tool for you to have as well, just for now and for your future, so you can understand how to underwrite properties. Maybe in the future, you want to try to flip some properties. Maybe you just want to understand how much it costs to renovate. These are all things that we're more than happy to work with you on. So right now I want to stop just for a second. I'm going to pull up Zillow. I'm just going to do something live, so it may be a little bit clunky, but I really want to show you very clearly how we can find something on the MLS using a tool like Zillow to find a fixer, because there's a lot of them. You can set up different filters using Zillow or the MLS where they email them to you every day, which I would highly recommend. Or you can just open it up and search, and you could find dozens every single day that are listed or have been sitting on market. So let me see here. I'll go ahead and pull up Zillow. So, okay. So this is where I'll start. The very first place I look is, okay, I'm going to look over the investor's criteria. So I'm going to look over the Flipur Buy Box that I shared. Again, we'll share that after the webinar so you can keep it on your desk and say, okay, what's the areas that they're looking for? You can then put those areas directly into the MLS or Zillow. So let's just say we want to do Orange County, because that was one of our buy boxes, and that's where I'm currently at, so even better. So now I want to look at properties that are for sale, and I'm going to go through and fill out the criteria of the buy box. I want to make sure I'm going to deselect these. Okay, they said on this buy box, I'm going to look, yep, houses, townhomes, condos are okay. Multifamilies is an interesting one. It's not an area we focus, so I would highly recommend at the beginning, these are the first 3 that you really highlight. Multifamilies is a whole nother webinar, which can take a lot of time. And typically the only way we'll work on multifamilies is if they're delivered vacant, because we're hyper focused in on the fix and flip market. So let's just start with these 3. So now all I have here is, okay, it's something for sale, and I can see if it's a house, townhome, or condo. Next thing I'm going to check is I'm okay with square footage. I'm going to leave this open for now. But one of the other things we mentioned was price. So I'm going to stay under the exact sweet spot that was mentioned, which was about 1.2. Here's a 1.25. Okay, perfect. So now I still have a ton of properties. Sure, you could even just go through and look at the pictures if you like. Some people are very visual, and there's a lot less inventory than normal. So it's actually not that complicated. As you can see, this very first one randomly is a perfect example. Just by looking at the photos, you can tell. Almost everybody watching this, I'm sure, has experience looking at homes. Sometimes you look at the pictures like, okay, this is not as bad as I thought. But most of the time, from the very first front-facing photo, you can tell if it's a fixer. The other thing I liked about this was it was just listed. If I go back here, when I look at my filters, I still haven't even put any key terms in here, meaning I put some keywords in here like fixer-upper, needs help, TLC, all these things, which I'll show you in a second. I'm just looking at every possible house for sale. And just by looking at these photos at the very top level, I can tell that a lot of this is really investor activity. For instance, this looks like a fixer. Most likely investors will buy it. This looks like it could need some help, not much. This looks like it was actually already flipped by an investor. This one looks like it maybe was renovated as well. So typically you see 2 spectrums. You see houses that need to be renovated as soon as possible, and then you have houses that were just renovated. So it's not really typically too hard to identify a fixer just off the photos. So let's go ahead and use that very first one. So it falls really kind of all into the sweet spots. It's a very desirable home, right? It's in Orange County. It's a 3-bedroom, 2-bath. Again, kind of what everybody is hoping for. And again, that's what we really like. If you think of what most homeowners or future homeowners are desiring, it's at least 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom, and it's usually around 1,200 square feet. And you can also kind of play with that a little bit, but that's always a really nice sweet spot when we see there's 2 bathrooms. And one easy way I always recommend to do that is, like, if you have a young family or entry-level family, what would you like? And it's very easy to pick those. It's typically not going to be a mansion. I wish it was, but unfortunately, most people aren't moving right into mansions. And it's typically not something super small or super unique or has massive long stairways, things that could be really distracting if you have kids or if you have maybe some parents that are going to move into you. So just, use your discretion, but that's a very good sweet spot that we like. So if we again look at this 3-bedroom, 2-bath, I'm going to quickly look through the photos just to make sure I can tell so far. You got dead grass, you got a broken driveway, you got an original garage. The roof looks pretty original. So already it's giving me some really good indicators that this is a fixer. And as I look through, I can see cracks in the flooring. I can see the cabinets look like they are probably changed out, but they still need to be completely redone, kind of this old flooring. So just this alone, most people can see, okay, this house definitely needs some help. If you find a house that you're like, okay, this was renovated in the early 2000s, it still is considered a fixer. I know sometimes we work with agents that are like, this house is pretty clean. And there is some times where you'll get an end user that's going to buy and move into that house, but not that much anymore. You'll be surprised that even a house renovated 20 years ago is still pretty outdated. But again, this is a very obvious fixer. So I love this as the first perfect example. So now I'm going to find the after repair value on it. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy this address. I'm going to go ahead and throw it right back into Zillow. And then I'm just going to look around this house. That gives me a zoom in here of everything that's going on. So I'm going to first kind of get a feel for the area just to see what's going on. This one looks like it's renovated. It's a little bit bigger, but it's listed, been on market for a little while. But ultimately what I want to try to find is the sold comps. If you can find something that sold in the last 90 days, but you can go as much as 6 months. We like to stay within that window because we know in the last couple of years, the market's had some variables, especially with interest rates, what happened during the pandemic and everything else, that we like to stay within the last 6 months. It gives us the most relevant data. With low inventory, it can be hard. I will caveat that because there hasn't been a ton of sales. So sometimes you check in the last 90 or 60 days, or 6 months even, and you won't find a ton of comparable sales, but do your best to find the best possible ones. So I'm going to go ahead and apply that, and I'm going to go ahead and zoom in. I was on Oasis here, so I'm going to zoom in and see what has sold. The easiest thing for me to do is find after repair valued comps, meaning houses that were just renovated. I'm not really looking for houses that were kind of renovated or touched up. I want to really understand how much houses are selling for that are comparable to mine that have been recently renovated. The next thing I need to double check that I forgot is make sure I'm looking at within the same square feet, right? Comping 101. I'm sure some of you already caught that. So ours was just about 1,200 square feet. So I'm going to zoom out. I see not too many comparables, some fixtures. Let's take a look at this one. This one looks pretty clean. Sometimes when I can't find the photos, unfortunately, I have to go over to Redfin, or if you're working with the MLS, you can typically find those on the MLS as well. So not on Redfin as well, but you can sometimes find it in here. It does look like it's pretty clean. So that's a very good first comp that I can throw down. Sold back in April for 1.1 million. Very comparable, 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 1,200 square feet. So I like that one. So 1.1 is kind of my standard right now. I'll look around a little bit more, see what else is selling, and see if I can find anything else. And I can use these pictures over here that have sold recently for that price. If I need to, sometimes I'll open up my filters slightly. So I can try to go back 12 months. I don't like doing that as much, but you can try to open up your filters just slightly. The other thing that we don't like to do, which you'll get in the comping training after this webinar, is cross over some major roads. I like to just get a sense of it. So I'm crossing over Beach Boulevard here, which is not ideal because many times those are different zip codes, different pockets. So you want to stay close. This one's 1.2, but again, one thing you have to be very careful with is oversized lots or something else that adds a tremendous value here that our house just doesn't have. And this one looks like it has just an enormous lot, even though it's an original. So unfortunately, with the limited inventory, this looks like about our best after repair value. So I would typically go a little bit deeper, look a little bit further around, but just to show you a little bit of how this would work, I'm going to go ahead and take this as our best after repair value comp and use that number. So then you would go over to our handy dandy calculator, which again, will give you access to, put in the after repair value, which was 1.1 million. we had a 1223 square feet. Most of these rehabs are going to be, you know, in Orange County, especially nicer pockets of LA, nicer pockets of Riverside. You're going to be heavy high end is very, very common. But you can typically tell if the house needs a lot of renovation, it's always heavy. And most of the houses that we do are going to be high end. Length of project, 0 to 3 months, or 3 to 6 months, 10%, and no ADU. I'll give you this calculator so you can go over it and get this understanding a little bit more in depth. But just so you know, most projects are 3 to 6 months. Most profit for investors is right around 10%. And then this would be just if I added a garage or an ADU. Again, not a specialty of ours, like a brand new pool, but it's in there. If you have a pool and it needs help, then I would just say, okay, pool rehab, and it's going to add something for that pool rehab. So no ADU. So then comes to our offer price, $809. That's approximately what we would offer for it. Again, this is something you want to quickly run by your flipper representative to make sure, okay, does this make sense? Am I looking at this correctly? The good news here is, if I go back to my subject property, is it? It's $885. So in fact, it may seem like a lot, but we're not that far off. We're within $80,000. Many times it looks like this is vacant, so perhaps they're ready to move very, very quickly. So very strong terms may be incentivizing for this seller. So at this time, run it by your flipper representative, you write it up, submit our proof of funds, submit the offer, and you're done. Typically, you can do it within about 10 minutes, 15 minutes. It's going to take a little bit more time at first, but that's how you would find properties for us using the market. Last thing I'll show you really quick is just how to, if you want to be hyper efficient and use the keyword search, you can absolutely do that. It will help you find properties that are really just more focused in our buy box. So again, looking at houses, townhome condos, up to 1.25. Let's open up our square feet a little bit here because we're okay having bigger homes. That's okay. I was just using that for comps. And then I can use here, keywords. So you can see it pre-populates with some of the ones I use: TLC, fixer, renovated, handyman special, lots of words. We can actually share a form. I'll have to remind myself to take a note, but share a form as well that give all of the very, very common use of keywords in the MLS when listing fixers. So let's go ahead and write TLC, see if anything applies. There you go. You have 41 results. So you can see 41 properties, and you can almost see every single one of these just from the listing photo needs some type of tender loving care, needs a renovation. Some of them, maybe you have some leftover when it was originally listed and it's already been flipped, but most of these homes, as you can tell, I can probably click most any one of these, and this needs a renovation, right? So there's so much potential. In just a few minutes, I can find dozens and dozens of property in this condition that, like I said at the very beginning of the presentation, most newer home buyers will not move into something of this condition. So it has to be renovated. The homeowner currently most likely doesn't have the capital to be able to renovate this home and then sell it. So they essentially have to sell to an investor in most cases. So that's as simple as it is. I'm going ahead and pause there on the on-market search because I'll give you a little bit more material on how to use it. I just wanted to go through an example of actually how simple it is and how consistent you can be doing that. So I hope that made a ton of sense. The goal there, I will share for the on-market properties, is it comes down to volume. You have to be very, very consistent, and you want to be diligent. You want to follow up with every offer that you put in, have conversations with the listing agents, and try to make sure that you keep tabs, because many times those fixers, maybe they'll even get sold to a conventional buyer that thinks that they're going to make it work, but they fall out of escrow all the time. So keeping tabs on the offers that you're putting in, you can definitely tap into those. So this is a very, very first introduction to how you can find pocket listings, on-market properties, being a buyer's agent for Flipur, have our training materials, buy box criteria, and a Flipur representative to be able to support you along the way and put in 2, 3, 4, 5 offers every single day. It takes less than an hour or two once you get very diligent at it. And those will ultimately turn into contracts that will turn into closed escrows that will turn into additional commission. The best part, you could do most of it from your computer and working with us. and it could be something that's very, very consistent without having to go out there door knocking and spending a ton of money. It's just time and getting to understand how to work with us as an investor. So I'll end here, call to action. Right after this, you will receive in the next 24 hours or so a recording of this training. So if you ever missed any part of it, you joined late, no problem, you'll be able to watch it again. The underwriting calculator, the calculator I have on our website that I just used, you'll get that access, and I'll do a little video to show you how to do that, just in case I went too fast through that part. Finding the ARV training video, we have a nice PDF that goes through in very deep detail how we find after repair values that you can use if you like to pay attention to the detail, and I'll also provide a training video on that. Last two, dedicated Flipur representative. This is absolutely super, super, super valuable. So don't sleep on this. It's really nice to have somebody in the office that you can quickly text, you can quickly pick up the phone and say, hey, this is what I'm seeing. This is what I just saw. This is what I'm getting on my numbers. Somebody just sent me this. That's really, really valuable for you as you're ramping up to understand, okay, how can I work with Flipur that we can do a lot more transactions and you don't feel like you're kind of just left in the dust. And then last, of course, our buy box. I want to give you a very nice clean sheet that has a little bit more details of our terms, our conditions, what we're looking at, because nothing is more important than your time. And if you're spending the time wisely and valuably to be able to find the right properties, you'll have a much higher closure rate. The last thing I want is for people to get burnt out, to put in dozens of offers and they're just not sticking, or they're the wrong type of properties and they're not working. So having some really hyper focus on the properties that we're looking for as your client will be absolutely valuable to both of us. So I hope that was helpful for everybody and you enjoyed that. Like I said, you'll get this within about the next 24 hours and we cannot wait to work with you.
And also, if you're watching now and you have any questions, go ahead and email info at flipur.io. That's Flipur, FLIPUR.io. So any questions, feel free to email anytime. And when you get these call to actions within the next 24 hours, you can let us know if you have any questions there as well.
Great. Thank you all. Appreciate it.